look at this. The attendees list is growing, Roxana.
Yeah.
Well, hello, folks, and welcome to day 2 of Within Reach's Food Access is Community Care event series. My name is Kai Horton. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I am the manager of diversity, equity, inclusion, and community engagement here at Within Reach. I will be your host for the rest of the week, and I'm absolutely honored to be with you all. So Within Reach builds pathways to make it easier for Washington families and individuals to navigate complex and health and social services systems and connect them with the resources they need to be healthy and safe. In addition to helping people gain access to health insurance and providing information on immunizations and child development, food access is actually one of the many veins of our work. Our direct service team here at Within Reach are the experts in the field of navigating the complex and often inaccessible systems that keep people from getting their basic needs met. We recognize, though, that we're not alone in this work and that there's this vast network of people doing amazing food access work in the community, and we wanted to celebrate that. So over the course of this week, you will hear from some amazing community organizers on topics such as the future of food. Shout out to Joy for an amazing session yesterday. Food justice, why culturally appropriate food is key to liberation, food sovereignty, and so much more. Our biggest hope for this offering is that we spotlight and center an intersectional lens and approach to what we mean when we say access and community care when it comes to food. Today, we have the honor and the privilege to learn from an incredible human engaging in this food access work. So it's my absolute pleasure to introduce you to Roxana Pardo Garcia, aka La Roxay. Roxana's pronouns are she and they. They are a self-identifying hood intellectual Chingona who was born and raised on occupied Coast Salish territory. Roxana is the founder, cultural worker, and certified Chingona of 2 small businesses, La Roxay Productions and Hood Intellectual Chingona. She is also the co-founder and project lead of Alimentando al Pueblo, and she was named one of Seattle Times 2020 heroes and the 2020 Burien Citizen of the Year. Roxana, we are so grateful to learn from you today and be with you. And so I'm so excited to get started. Hello.
Hey, Kai. Hey, everybody. Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
We're right now at 65 and counting, Roxana, but I think, you know what, let's just get started. How does that sound?
Do this.
All right, cool. So let's start with the basics. Alimentando al Pueblo, where did that name come from?
I saw the question and I was like, I don't have a fancy story. So we started this initiative and I text my homegirl Sandy Restrepo, who's the executive director at Colectiva and one of our partners. And I was like, what are we gonna call this? Because we're all about naming things like something really cool and hip. And she was like, how about something with feeding? And I was like, feeding the pueblo. So that's where that came from. And then we translated everything. And so Alimentando al Pueblo is a translation. And so we just kind of stuck with it. And that's what we went with. We went with Alimentando al Pueblo. And I think it really spoke to the work that we do because to alimentar in Spanish is to nourish. And it on so many different meanings, and so we don't go by feeding el pueblo anymore. We're strictly alimentando al pueblo, but that's where it came from. It was really just me and my homegirl being like, what are we gonna name this child? Like, what are we gonna name this baby that's about to be birthed? So that's where that came from.
That's beautiful. So I mean, obviously, nourishing the pueblo, feeding the pueblo. Why? Where did this work come from? Why this work now?
Oh gosh. So we came, the program and now evolving nonprofit came from it is a direct result of the pandemic. So there's professional and personal intersections as to what got us to this place. The personal is like everybody else was having an identity crisis at the beginning of the pandemic, particularly those of us who do community work. And a lot of us were questioning, is this where I need to be right now? And when the pandemic took off, I was working in police accountability. I was also working in police accountability when the uprisings against the police violence also popped off. And it was very highly bureaucratic work. So it wasn't doing anything for me or my community. And I was at this crossroads of like, is this where I need to be? Like, do I need to be cooped up in a governmental system during a global pandemic? Like, is this where I have to be? And so one thing led to another. And, I talked to my aunt or I was listening to a conversation, eavesdropping on a conversation my aunt was having with my mom. And she was talking about food banks and how she needed food, but she didn't want to go to the food bank because she wouldn't take or she couldn't use the things that they were giving her. And it just kind of like this light bulb went off. And I was like, why don't we have Latino food banks? Like, it started as a very simple question, like, why don't we have food banks or food programs that give people the food that they actually eat? And so I reached out to all of my homegirls who happen to be executive directors of nonprofits in the area that we serve. And I said, hey, what do you think about collaborating on this food pantry? And they all were like, yeah, let's do it. So it was my small business, the church that we are currently housed at, and 4 nonprofits in our community. And it grew exponentially. And as we were creating this model of like, what do we want this to feel, sound, smell, taste like, take into account that like we are working with a population that has been disproportionately impacted by this pandemic, in addition to the historical legacies of pillaging and of marginalization and disenfranchisement of our community. And so one of the things that like dawned on me at the beginning of the pandemic was like, crap, like this pandemic is going to be felt and is going to reverberate through like 7 generations ahead. Like we are going to recall this pandemic literally in our DNA for years to come. And so okay, how can we utilize this project to facilitate the healing of our community while we're still experiencing this crisis? Because what's going to happen is that we're going to wait until the crisis is over and then start to like, address the harm or address the trauma. And I'm like, we got to start addressing it now. We got to get this now. And so that's really what's at the heart of this work is like, how do we facilitate healing through the influencing of the senses, the taste, the touch, the smell, and to really like set our community up for a different reality generations to come.
Oof, yeah, I'm so struck by this vision statement that's on your website that says our vision is to have joyful communities. And I feel like I know you speak about your work as promoting healing through food and community and celebration. And I've been sitting a lot with the role that joy or play have in our activism. And I'm curious from your side, what does joy or play or connection play in our activism and in our work of countering systemic oppression?
Yeah, when I was in undergrad, and I'm sure a lot of folks can relate to this, is like for those of us who don't receive the language of power, privilege, and oppression when we're younger, we get acquainted with it in institutions of higher education. Like very unfortunate reality, but a lot of us, that's how we come into this like this consciousness, right? And one of the things that I was really good at when I was an undergrad was being incredibly angry and feeling like I couldn't have moments of joy. Like I was like, how can I be joyful when there's racism and classism and transphobia and homophobia and all of these things, right? And of course, what does that lead to? That leads to burnout. That leads to being so tired and like not being able to celebrate the things that we've accomplished or the wins that we have garnered, like all these things. And one of the folks that I look to for their teachings is Trisha Hersey, a Black woman who runs the NAT ministry. And she talks a lot about like how our imagination and our dream space are literally where the future lives. Like if we are too tired to dream, if we are too tired to imagine, how are we going to create the world that we are hoping for? And I think that like that joy is so part of that ability to be able to rest, the ability to imagine and to dream, right? And I think about when I've heard my mom say to me, like, I just want to take a day off. She's like, oh, that's nice. I want to take a day off too. And I was like, don't say it like that. I'm like, you shouldn't be able to take a day off and not feel guilty. And I think like joy is it's a human emotion, right? Like if we didn't need it, it wouldn't be part of our ability to express, right?
Mm.
And so I'm like, why is it that we are not like this work is already serious as it is? Like, why can we not be joyful? Why can we not come from a place of creating joy and wanting our communities to experience joy? Right? Like and I don't want to say it's the complete opposite of what we're experiencing, because I think that joy can exist with outside of the confines of colonial paradigms, you know?
Mm.
And so I'm like, this is not the opposite of our existence. This is literally an alternative to our existence. Because I'm like, I don't want, because when we think about opposites, again, we're still operating within this context, and I don't want to operate within the context anymore. I want to create a completely different way of being. And so I think that being able to move from a place or work from a place of joy allows us to operate with outside of the context of colonial paradigms.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for that. It's making me think about like how irregular it is to like arrive in spaces that hold that vision of what you're talking about here. Like, how do we center joy in things that are inherently painful and grief inducing, right? Like, how do we hold that nuance? And it has me thinking about like, what do you want people to feel when they come through on a Monday at Alimentando al Pueblo? How do you want them to feel, and what do you hope that their experience could be like?
Yeah, I think, like as I mentioned earlier, like a lot of this work is this like intersection of like my professional and like personal world colliding.
Mm.
And a lot of the times when I'm like sitting here and dreaming and envisioning and imagining, I think about like my 14-year-old self and what I did not have and what I wish I could have had. And I think about all of the 14 and 13-year-olds that exist in my community and be like, what do they need to see to be able to like step into their power? And so a lot of what we do is coming from this place of trying to create possibility for our community. And so when they roll up, they're greeted by me and like 5 other brown women. Their language, who show up in a very authentic ways. Often they are greeted with music, whether that's live music or just music that we're playing from a speakerphone. We're laughing, like we're not like, oh, here again, or we're not like, weren't you here last week? There's none of this like shaming. It's like, it's so good to see you. Welcome back. Like, and I'd be joking with this sometimes because I'd be like, it's good to see you. I mean, is it good to see you? I wish you weren't here, but I'm glad you're here. And I get to joke around in the language that people are familiar with. And so I just want folks to feel affirmed. I want them to feel validated. I want them to feel seen. But I want them to see that like, just because we serve majority, 100% of our community is monolingual immigrant Spanish speaking mothers, and like patriarchy has done its business in our community. And I want them to look at us and be like, this came from our community. Like, this came from imagination. If we are just able to rest just a day out of the week, this is what we are capable of manifesting. And so I think that, to me, that's what I want folks to feel, is I want them to see themselves reflected in the work that we're doing, in the type of culture that we're trying to cultivate, and the energy that we're trying to emit. And I just feel really affirmed and validated and seen and held, and held through this really difficult time, because literally it's the Latina mamas that are holding it down for our community. Like, they're out there hustling, trying to get resources to their networks, to their families. And so, yeah, those are just some of the things that I would hope they would feel as they come to us.
Yeah, I love that. And I love what you're saying. Earlier you spoke to like appealing to all the senses as an experience. And I think there's something really beautiful about folks of color and our cultures and our communities, like the multitudes that exist within that label, right? And there's something about the fluidity of how sensory that experience can be when you're held with folks that look like you and identify similarly to you. And I'm curious, I heard you talk about art earlier in this conversation, and culture obviously as well. And I'm curious what art and culture play, how, like, what role do they play in your approach to food access, and why are they so central to your work?
Yeah, so I mentioned that we have like you know, we have live music. So we've contracted with the Seattle Women's Steel Pan Band with a couple of mariachis to come and play as people are like driving through. We've commissioned several art pieces from an artist in our community that we give out to community, that we've given out to over 400 families. We also had a really cool partnership with Seattle Mutual Aid Books, Mutual Aid Books Seattle, and they donated hundreds of books in Spanish and English by Black and Brown authors. I think to me, like, again, like that 14-year-old version of me, just I remember like you cannot be affirmed in what you do not see, you know?
Mm,
It's just like these young people, I mean, it's 2022 and these young people are entering classrooms with no art that looks like them, or even educators that look like them, right?
mm,
And so I'm like, we have multifaceted problems. We need to have multifaceted solutions. And the ways in which we do our work has to be dynamic, because that is what is needed in our community.
mm,
Like, we absolutely have to be dynamic in the way that we do our work, because we are trying to address multiple issues in a one-stop shop, right? Like,
mm.
food banks are probably the only place that people have been consistently going through during the pandemic. You know, like even when
Right.
things were shut down, like these are the places that people were gathering. And so I think that, like, you know, art and culture is so central to being a person of color. You know, like historically tracing our roots back to, like, you know, our homelands before colonization. Like, it was dance, it was music, it
Mm,
was the art pieces that were created. And so to me, I'm like, this is natural to have this be a part of our food distribution. And it only adds to the flavor, you know, to the sazon, to like the
mm,
vibe of the space. And you know, it's been so beautiful to watch. Like, I remember the first time we had music on our sidewalk, it was the Women's Steel Pan Band, and it was like in the fall, and it was cold, and it was like gray. And I kid you not, as soon as they started playing, like the sky, the clouds parted, the sun started shining, and I'm over here like boo-hoo crying, like, I can't believe this is happening. And people in the food line were
mm.
fascinated. I mean, like, everybody took out their phones, started taking pictures, started taking videos. I had this little kid jump out the car and like, I want to take a picture with the musicians. And like, I remember this little girl, she's like, why do you have music? She's like, why are you, like, she just was so confused. And I was like, because it makes us happy. I was like, does this make
Mm.
you happy? And she was like, I'm really happy. And I was like, yes, like that makes. And so, like, it just, you know, to liven up the mood, you know, like this is naturally what we do as people. Like, even when we're grieving as a community, there's music involved, you
Mm.
know, there's always music. And so it just feels natural to be able to integrate that into the way that we do our work.
Yeah, and I imagine that, like, when you're engaging the senses like that, and I forget exactly the words that you used a little bit ago, but something along the lines of like you can't see yourself in things that don't represent you, or something like that. Like, I to me, I equate that to like that inner power source, right? Like that inner knowing that's rooted in like 7 generations behind us and in front of us, right? And I'm curious, like, because of all these like sensory things that are happening when you arrive in your space, like, what strengths do you see in your community as they come together in this context?
I think that one thing that we're realizing, like, because for a long time our community, so the church that we're housed at, they had their own food distribution for a really long time. They were getting WSDA boxes, and then we were giving out food on Mondays. And I remember when we first started, they're like, we would ask people, do you want a Mexican box or a Central American box? So we have two different kinds. And people would just stare at us. They'd be like, huh? And I was like, and they just didn't know. And I was like, where are you from? And they're like, oh, I'm from Mexico. I was like, all right, I'll give you the Mexican box. Uh, and I remember it was like such a shock to so many people. And like, I think they thought that they were the other boxes. And so when they would go home and then we would see them 2 weeks later, they were like, I didn't know that, like, everything. And like, we've had several like firsthand accounts of like people experiencing other people open our boxes, and they're like, their faces just light up,
Mm,
are in total shock. They're like, this is everything that I need. Like, this is everything that I cook with. This is everything I needed for like the week. Like, this is, and one thing that we're trying to do as we're building this organization is tell people, like, you actually deserve more than this.
Mm.
Like, this is a very small percentage of what was stolen from you and what is owed to you. And so trying to be like, and I think like one of the things that one of our partners has said to me is like, nonprofits have a really good way of making people pathetic, in the sense that we're really, as as the nonprofit industrial complex, we are really good at telling people to pimp out their trauma and pimp out their pain.
Mm.
And I remember that when we started our project, people would really lean in with the trauma and pain, like, oh, I'm here because my husband lost his job, my kids got COVID, I got like, and I'm like, and I remember I would just put my hand like this and be like, I don't even know. Like, I don't even know. I was like, I am part of your community. I read all the statistics. I'm good. You are here for a reason, and that's enough for me. Like, you are in this line for a reason, and so really trying to transform that interaction between, like, moving from that charity model to that justice model of
Mm.
like people being like, thank you, thank you. I'm like, yes, you can express your gratitude and you can demand more.
Mhm.
Like, this doesn't end at this food box. This actually is a systemic problem that needs to be addressed. And it needs to be addressed by the people who are holding this power. So I think that that's where some of the conversations have been going with our collective and with the folks that we've been trying to work with to build up like the culture and structure of our organization. Is just like, this is not about charity. This is about justice. And what does it look like for all of us to be involved in the fight for justice?
Yeah, you're speaking to this point that I remember when we first met. You brought up like how so many folks in our communities like don't see themselves represented at different food banks, and although the food bank model is so key to access to food, a lot of times there's still like a very Eurocentric sort of focus on the types of things that are available. And I'm curious, could you speak more to that whole process of making a decision to really center the Latinx community as like, this is for you, that these food products are for you?
Yeah. Yeah, so we had our founding partners and then we had our founding members. So each of our partners sent over volunteers to us when we first started. So it was me, my mama, because she got voluntold, and then Sandra Simara, Susana Cejas, Patricia Palomino, and my mama Ida Pardo. We and one of our partners, Lucia Martinez. I remember we were standing in a circle and we are like, what are we gonna give? Like, what is it that we are going to give? And as somebody who is Mexican, I would say identifies as Mexican, I am Mexican. Someone who's Mexican, I recognize that Mexicans within the context of the Latino community take up an incredible amount of space, just because of the sheer population demographics and like immigration waves and trends. With that being said, I also know that as someone who's trying to build something for the community, I need to be very hyper aware of who is not at the table. And one of the things that we said from the jump was like, we need to serve our Central American community. Like, besides Mexicans in our Highlands in the service area, we also have a pretty big amount of Central American folks. And so that's where the idea came from to create these two boxes. We have a Mexican box and a Central American box. And about like 80% of the things in the boxes are similar: rice, beans, masa, flour, oil, coffee. And then the other 20% vary depending on the boxes. So in the Mexican boxes, you'll find tortilla, you'll find fideo, which is the type of pasta, chiles en vinagre, pickled jalapenos, a little bit spices that are used in Mexico. And then you go to the Central American box and you got a little bit more of a Caribbean flavor. You got your coconut milk, you have your evaporated condensed milk, you have pasta, you have diced tomatoes, and you also have yuca and plátano. And we were like, we have, because the majority of our staff is Mexican, and we've also had the discussion of like, we have a responsibility to the rest of the community and to the rest of the folks that are not at the table with us at this moment. And so that's where that idea came from. And also, we source our food directly from Latino distributors. We have a partnership with Mariposa Farms in Everson, Washington, and they are the ones that give us all our produce boxes. And we work directly with Latino distributors to source all of our food, because we know that small businesses were incredibly impacted by this pandemic. Again, multifaceted issues require multifaceted solutions. So that's where that came from. I was like, we got to give people the food they eat. And it's really funny because people were like, they're like, you gave us exactly everything we eat. And I was like, do you not see me? I eat the same foods you do. Like, it's not like, you know, there's some white folks working in the background. Like, this is us. Like, this is what we do, this is who we are. And it's just always beautiful to like see the awe and like, wow, like I never thought of this. And I was like, yeah, clearly, because we're like one of the very few food banks that operates this way. So
That's beautiful. Yeah, I remember when we first met, I was really struck by something that you said. You were talking about, you know, taking an anti-racist approach to food access, and then you said anti-colonial as well. And I'm curious, like, what does an anti-colonial approach to food access mean to you?
yeah, so I think the first thing to establish is that like anti-racism is a strategy of anti-colonial work. And I
Mhm.
say that because for those of you in the room who are not familiar, like colonialism has what I call legacies, right? It has children, it has like things. And one of the things that it had, you know, we have white supremacy, which is probably the most well known. And of course, racism falls under that. Then we have male supremacy or patriarchy as we know it, right? And then we have human supremacy, right, which is the ways in which we interact with all other living creatures on the earth. And then we have capitalism. So when I say anti-colonial frameworks, I'm talking about those legacies and how to address those legacies, right? Because the reality is that racism exists, but it also intersects with sexism, right? I mean, we're talking about a collective of people. 99% of our team are women, are immigrant monolingual Spanish speaking women. And so what does it mean to understand that there is there's a wage gap in the ways in which that Latinas are compensated for their time. And we were very, very adamant from the beginning that we were going to pay everybody on our staff. Once we got money, we started paying folks living wages. We're like, we're not gonna start from a scarcity mindset. There is enough. There's actually more than enough. And so that is one of the strategies under this like anti-colonial framework is like we got to pay people living wages if they're going to be working here. The other thing is like repairing and understanding our relationship to land. Like we're talking about food, like we're talking about things that come from the earth. And so one of the things that we do want to evolve our work into is like sustainable, urban gardens.
Mm.
Like getting a lot of our families live in apartment complexes that don't have the ability for pea patches. And so what does it mean for folks who live in these really tight living conditions to grow their own food and to be able to support their neighbors in growing food and sharing food? Um, and so like it's more than just acknowledging, you know, racism. And also Latinos, we're just a modge podge of a whole bunch of different races. And so we span different races and we're an ethnicity, if folks didn't know. Like we're not a racial group, we're an ethnic group. And so there's also acknowledgments of just like the anti-Black racism within our own community. When we first launched, we launched right during all of the protests for George Floyd, and we're like, what is our responsibility to the Black folks in our community? And so 10% of our donations went to a local Afro Latino run organization, and we partnered with them throughout the year of 2020 to provide boxes so that they could give to their community.
Mm.
And so it's a myriad of things, but I think it's just like part of it is just like there shouldn't be food banks. Like food, like I remember one of my aunties, she was like, you know, what you do is inspirational, but it's a travesty. And I was like, hell yeah, it's a travesty. I was like, the fact that we gotta feed people in the most well-resourced area of the world, like this is beyond me. This is beyond me. So I think it's a combination of a lot of things, but it's directly addressing, yes, racism and white supremacy. It's also addressing patriarchy. It's addressing human supremacy, and it's addressing capitalism.
Yeah, and I feel like, you know, like you said a little bit ago, your model is so unique. I feel like so many folks have not tapped into the importance of the work that you all are doing in this way. And I'm curious, like, how do you believe other organizations or organizers could adopt a similar approach of an anti-colonial lens to this work?
I think folks think that like this is rocket science or you need to have a PhD in like race studies, and you don't.
Right.
Like you just gotta be in touch with your humanity. Like at the end of the day, one of the biggest projects of colonialism was to remove people, white people included, from their spirit and their humanity. And so the question, there's a Maori saying that I really have appreciated lately, and it's like moving backwards into the future. Like all of us have the DNA of an ancestor or ancestors that existed before the context of colonialism. Like we all have it. Like again, white folks included, because white folks love to exclude themselves from this. No, white folks included. Like we all have literally the DNA and the memories of people that existed before the context of colonialism. And so we literally have it written in our DNA to know how to do this work. And it is the bureaucracy, it's the systems, it's the over intellectualization of this work that removes us further and further from our ability to actually take action and do the work. You know, like we get so gaslit by racism, you know, so gaslit by sexism into thinking or believing that we are not enough or that our ideas are not enough. And to me, I'm just like, I never once didn't think that our idea was not enough. If anything, I was just like, how can I get more money? Like, I was like, how can I get more money and keep doing this? And so I think that like, again, it's not, people love to over intellectualize. They want to do surveys and focus groups and they need data and this. And I'm like, that, like, again, you're operating within the paradigms of colonialism. And in order to not do that, you actually have to step fully into your humanity to be able to do the work of humanity, you know?
Yeah.
So I would say that like we have a training available for free for existing food banks who are interested in taking on this work, and some considerations that you should have as you build out, you know, programs or build out branches of your work to serve diverse populations. And we also have a training for community folks who are interested in starting food pantries and some things that they got to keep in mind as they create and start these food pantries in their communities. So we do have a resource and it's free for folks. I'll drop my contact in the chat so y'all can have it in case you want to reach out. But again, it's not rocket science, yo. Like this is literally the work of being a person on Earth. It's not that difficult, I promise.
Yeah, please, can we find that information on your website as well? I can send this out as information to all the attendees as well.
You know, we're going through a little website rehaul situation at the moment. We're still adding to it, so it's not on there. But
okay.
Yes.
We'll connect, and I'll find a way to connect folks to you, because I know that's a resource a lot of folks in this room will probably want to take you up on.
Yeah.
Roxana, I know.
2 hours, but it's fun. I promise.
Yeah, I want to join. So I know you talk a lot about ancestors in your work, which I absolutely loved when I first met you, and just like through learning more about you today. And I'm curious, like a lot of folks, like you said, are feeling like disembodied from their lineages, right? Because of these systems of oppression that sort of like make us forget. They like completely erase who we are and who we're made of, right? And I'm curious, like, what are some practices that folks can do to deepen their relationship with ancestors through food?
Oh, like, you know, I think that you know, when I think about ancestors, folks think about people who are like 100 years ago, you know. They're just like, oh, like these people I don't know. And I just want to remind us that our ancestors are like our grandparents who passed away. There are siblings who have passed away. Like there are people that we walk this earth with that we have connection to. And I would start there for those of us who are like, who are, you know, as you said, like disembodied from our relationship. I would start with the people that you do know that are now living with ancestors. And I'm sure you know their favorite foods. I'm sure you know, like when you sit down to eat and break bread, like make a plate for them and invite, you know, because they're always there. And I think that a lot of the reasons why a lot of us feel disconnected from our ancestry is all like shit that's steeped in man-made BS, you know? I'm just like, our ancestors are always with us. Like, it's just our responsibility to call them in. Whether that's through food or through song or through, you know, leaving them a glass of water or their favorite alcoholic beverage out, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's all sorts of ways in which we can connect. But I would say, like, start with the ones you know. Like, unfortunately, so many of us have lost loved ones as a result of this pandemic. And one of the things that we can do to kind of integrate this grief into our life is to practice, you know, is to practice our connection. And it may feel weird. And again, it only feels weird because of colonialism.
Right.
Like, you know, it only feels odd to speak to spirits or to speak to someone who's not there because of colonialism. And so I would say speak to them, you know, offer them a cup of coffee when you drink your coffee in the morning, a cup of tea, some water, create a little space where you can just, you know, have some pictures of them and offer them a meal. But I would say those are some of the things that we can start with.
Yeah, whenever I think about ancestors, I also think about descendants and future generations. And I know you talk a lot about that, like, what can I do now for the future generations to come? And I'm curious, like, what is one thing, if there is one thing that you could say to the descendants of the future generations surrounding this work, what would it be?
Oh shit.
I know that's a tough one.
That's a tough one. I don't know, be all deep and be all resonated and stuff. I would say it's in you. Like, you are born with everything that you need to live in this world. That's what I would say.
Just receiving that for a sec.
And they better take it because that was profound. that came from the heart.
That's right. We need to make a quote from that.
Someone write it down.
I hope one of our 100 attendees is writing that down right now.
I hope so.
Yes,
like, you are everything that you need, you know, to live in this world.
Beautiful. And I guess to close this session out, the last question that I was holding for you is, what do you hope the future is for our food systems?
Oh, that we live in the abundance that exists. You know, like, the food systems as they are operate from a place of scarcity, operate from a disembodied relationship to earth, you know, and again, there is no need to have food banks. There's absolutely no need to have food banks, because that means that an inequity exists, you know. And again, there is more than enough. There is more than enough food. There's more than enough resource. And so I would say that like, we create a better relationship to land and to the things that nourish and sustain us, and to, like, move towards a place where, like, you know, where the earth is thriving and it's not inflamed, because the earth is inflamed a little bit right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, yes. And so I'm like, we just need to move to a healthier place with our relationship to earth and to all its living creatures. And, you know, like, let's live in the abundance that exists. So yeah, that'd be.
Roxana, this conversation was so beautiful. I can't wait to rewatch it over and over again. I'm gonna be like our attendees and probably taking a bunch of quotes and really sitting with everything that you said. For real, it's been an absolute honor to talk to you today. Thank you so much for the work that you do. I'm so excited that we were able to partner with you for this session. You have over 100 folks here that are learning about your mission, and I hope that we can reach even more people so that they can learn from you and learn from your community. Just thank you so much for your time today. It was so powerful to speak with you.
Yeah, thanks, Kai, for reaching out. I don't know if I don't have access to the chat, but I'm not seeing anything.
Yeah, so I guess on GoToWebinar, which is strange, we can't actually see the chat. But maybe while I'm closing us out here, there could be a few questions that come through. So folks, oh, here we go. Here's one. Wonderful. I'm hearing my grandmother with happy tears. Thank you for sharing. There's one. Let's see. We got a wow, all caps. Thank you so much. So yeah, lots of love coming through the questions aspect here. I'm looking here. Roxana, you are incredible. Thank you so much. Yeah, there's so many good things here. Roxana, I might send some of these questions over to you and get you to maybe share some of the resources from some of the folks that you mentioned. It looks like there's a few folks just sort of curious who that Afro Latinx group is that you partner with and those sorts of things. So maybe we can touch base after that. How does that sound?
Oh, good.
Awesome. Yeah, so many, this is so amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, I hope you feel that love, Roxana, because I know that this was a huge session for us. So I really appreciate you.
And, you know, just a little shameless pitch. If any of y'all in this room have money and you don't know what to do with it, feel free to send it our way so that we can continue to cultivate our creativity. Is, you know, my only shameless plug.
I second that. Please support Alimentando al Pueblo if you have the resources to do so and the passion to do so. They're incredible, as you know now. So thank you so much. Thank you also to the amazing attendees that joined us today. I really appreciate you all being here. It wouldn't be the same if we didn't have such an amazing group of people supporting us in this event. Tomorrow we have a cooking class with Chef Melissa Miranda from Musang in Seattle. She'll be talking to us about the importance of reconnecting to lineage and ancestry through food and community, and also teaching us a classic Filipinx dish called chicken tinola. So please feel free to tune in then. Roxana, please come back and be with us for the rest of the series, and just be with us forever, please, because you're amazing. It was.
Yo, I'm gonna leave this planet at some point. Be here as long as I can.
Oh, that sounds really good. Yeah, thank you so much. And we'll see you here tomorrow, y'all, at 12 p.m. for our next session. Thank you so much. And thank you to the Within Reach team for your support and just unwavering presence in this work. Yeah, thank you. Take good care, y'all.
Bye. Bye.